Hello, my friends. I'm Samantha, and welcome to the Sedge Circle podcast. How are you today? I truly hope you are well. You may have seen people online talking about higher consciousness. And you might be asking yourself, what is it? How do I do it? Or can I even do it? And many would have you believe the different dimensions of consciousness are complex, and with their help and a small payment of $19.95, they can explain it to you so you too can experience the bliss that comes from this illumination. But what is it really? And is it really so difficult? It's important to point out I'm talking about more of a philosophical consciousness. I'm talking about themes in nature, and that includes human nature. The scientific study of nature and its rules is definitely complex. Everything from thunderstorms to subatomic particles, nature is mathematically very complex, and we have yet to fully understand it. But nature, her themes, cycles, and archetypes are something we humans have been observing since the dawn of time, and there is wisdom to be gained from it. So the first question we need to ask is, what is consciousness? We hear that word a lot, but what does it really mean? Now, the true meaning of consciousness has been debated by philosophers and scholars for centuries. And while there are slight differences of opinions, simply put, consciousness is the awareness of existence. You are aware. You exist. So now that we understand the idea of consciousness, we can start to explore the different quote-unquote levels of this consciousness. Now, I'll admit, I cringe a little when I hear people speak of humanity quote-unquote moving into higher consciousness, and it's not because I think they're wrong, but because of how these ideas have been packaged, branded, and sold. In a way, it feels cheapened. By making it complicated, they've made it profitable. And I usually try my best to keep from using New Age concepts, but even I cannot deny their usefulness. I know a lot of these ideas have been watered down, simplified, and broken down into bite-sized pieces, making them easier to digest. And even in my own podcast, I'm going to present them in a very generalized way. But it is my hope you will take these ideas and expand them into your own studies. And last but not least, I am in no way an Ayurvedic practitioner, and I feel it's important to declare that. Because to explain these differences in consciousness, I'm going to use the chakra system. There are many different models that have been created by many different cultures over time, but the chakra system, at least as far as collective knowledge is concerned, is adequate for this conversation. I feel it's important to mention that what we know of the chakra system today is very different from its original creation. The color associations, for example, weren't added until the 1920s, and majority of the applications we currently use didn't arise until around the 1970s. However, as I have always said, ancient does not equal authentic, and we shouldn't turn our noses up at systems that help us to better know ourselves and live peacefully. We're meant to learn and evolve our ideas to better serve us as well as others. Now let's move on to the actual chakra system. If you look at a diagram of the chakra system, you will see 7 different energy centers. These energy centers are associated with a different color, red at the base, all the way through the rainbow to white or purple at the crown of the head. Each energy center is also associated with a different aspects of our lives. They are also associated with different foods, mantras, mudras, and so on. And I could spend an entire podcast on the different associations of each of these, but for simplicity's sake, I'm going to stick to the basic characteristics. So here is a quick and very generalized description of each chakra. The base chakra is the color red and is associated with our basic needs: food, shelter, as well as the earth and our ability to be grounded to it. It's located at the base of our spine. Moving upwards into the second chakra, it is associated with the color orange and is the center of our feelings. It is the chakra of connection, pleasure, and intimacy. The third chakra, somewhat around our navel area, is associated with the color yellow and is the center of our intellect and personal energy. It is how we apply the energy from the first 2 chakras. In a way, it's like our life force. The fourth chakra is the color green and is in our heart. This is the center of our compassion, forgiveness, and love of others and ourselves. The fifth chakra, located at our throat, is the color blue, and how we communicate those first 4 chakras. It is the center of expression and how we use our creative energy. The sixth is the color indigo and is the center of our consciousness, spirituality, and enlightenment. It is where any kind of psychic abilities lie, but it is also our ability to see as well as to listen. The 7th and final chakra is our connection to divine love, energy, and wisdom. You will notice in some diagrams it's associated with the color purple, but in others it is represented by the color white. One interesting tidbit is the color red has a fast-moving wavelength as far as light is concerned. But as we go up in the color spectrum, the wavelengths get longer, they become slower. And as we move up those energy centers, we also become slower, smoother, and more calm. It's an interesting parallel, if I do say so myself. Now that you have a basic outline of the proverbial energy centers of our bodies, we can begin to talk about higher consciousness. I know I said it wasn't complicated, and ultimately it's not. But there is a method to this madness. You'll notice the first 3 chakras deal mainly with aspects of our physical beings. They are our basic needs like food, shelter, community, and connection. One might even equate them to Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid, and if you've never heard of that, I definitely suggest you look it up. These are the, and bear with me, lower forms of consciousness. These are the more primal facets of our being, and they encourage survival. But once we get to the 4th chakra, we start to see our focus begins to change. No longer are we focusing on those base human needs, but beginning to address the non-physical aspects of our lives. We also begin to see these concepts are some of the hardest to engage in, things like forgiveness, compassion, and trusting in ourselves. And that, my friends, right there, is where I believe we begin to live in a higher consciousness. When we are no longer preoccupied by the primal and survival characteristics of our lives, and move more into the nuances of life as a human on this planet. When we learn to trust ourselves, our intuition, to offer compassion, and see ourselves as divine beings. When we are no longer motivated by scarcity and fear. When we see the divine connection between ourselves and every other being on this planet. This, I believe, is higher consciousness. That does not mean we no longer place importance on things like food, shelter, and community. After all, these things are essential to survival, and without those as our foundations, we wouldn't even be here to reach a higher level of consciousness. We cannot forget our physical bodies and the communities in which we live. We cannot forget connections to others. I feel a lot of new age topics have a bad habit of forgetting these grounding things, these first 3 energy centers, almost bypassing them for the spiritual. And that is not the reality of our lives. There are many gurus out there who will suggest once you are living in a higher level of consciousness that you transcend human existence and might even begin to glow. I feel this is one more way to make higher consciousness unattainable. But what if it really was that simple? What if living with love, compassion, and connection was the end goal of that journey? I also don't believe higher consciousness is something we obtain and now we're enlightened and above everyone else. Energy moves, and there will always be times our energy or our thoughts and emotions will move from energy center to energy center. And we have new experiences every day that are essentially filtered through these aspects or energy centers in our lives. The chakra system and those like it are designed to be aids so we can better compartmentalize and address these experiences. Every feeling is necessary and natural, but the difference between lower and higher consciousness is how we react to them and what we do with them. Consider children for a moment. A typical very young child is very much focused on their basic survival needs. Obviously, those include more than food and shelter, but also connection and love. As a child ages, it begins to find itself in the big world and begins to feel compassion for other beings. That is relatively, at least, a higher level of consciousness for that child. As we grow, hopefully at least, those realizations create a more complex understanding of self and the universe. And the more we experience, the more diverse that understanding becomes. We begin, if we are receptive, to live in those higher energetic vibrations or wavelengths. So, is humanity moving toward a higher consciousness? I cannot say for certain, but I can say I have seen evidence of the possibility. We are in an age of information, and if we are able to digest that information in a more thoughtful way, we may just be. And I have seen many parents, speaking of children, gently helping their children move beyond the understanding of basic needs or the first 3 chakras or energy centers at earlier ages. Imagine how those children will grow and understand their place in the universe. But until we can ensure those basic needs are met in each person on Earth, we will have quite a mountain to climb in regards to collectively living in higher consciousness. So I always like to bring this back around to how this can help you and how this applies to being a witch or living a magical life. As many of you know, I include color a lot in my own magics. By using the chakra system and its associated colors, it can make setting your intention a lot easier. Perhaps you'd like to cultivate self-love. Pink is often associated with love in general, but what if instead you use the color green to choose the candles and stones you use in your spells and on your altar? What if you used that color's wavelength to help empower your own energy center, in this case, the heart? This is just one more way to understand and translate magical coding, as I've talked about in the past. It can also help us to decide what we need and what to ask for. It helps us discern where we are going, and where we need to go. I cannot stress enough the need for witches, or anyone for that matter, to conserve their energy for useful purposes. It helps us to know ourselves, recognize our needs, and plot any action we need to take on our own behalves. But then again, this is my perception. This is my understanding based on my own experiences, so I could be wrong. So I suppose that is all I have to say today. I realize that this was a very information-dense podcast today, and I think I may be expanding on these different ideas in the future. So that might be fun. Remember, my friends, if you like this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and to hit the like button so that others can find it as well. I want to thank you so much for giving me your time today for these few minutes. Thank you for your presence, and thank you for showing up. And until we meet again, my friend.